Hello again, just going to keep chipping away here as said before. So I'm going live today. I'm going to stay on this theme of what constitutes what people are talking about, and mainly I say people. They're women in a first world democracy who are basically believed by most people. There's a very high wind up today, so that whoong sound you can hear in the background is a polyphonic. Wouldn't hazard a guess at the note. The notes. Anyway, so this is an article. I'm just going to read some stuff from other people so that people understand what's being discussed. Though, of course, everyone's situation is completely peculiar. It's totally idiosyncratic. And so I don't usually do this, but it said Sonicio Enchantment. Hello. You're the only person here. Maybe I should wait. Don't know. Anyway, I'm just going to keep going. So in the Illawarra Mercury, which is a newspaper, an hour and a half south, I'm really tired, an hour and a half south of Sydney. We have an article by Laura Brooks. I don't know the exact date, but she says, when I was 12, my grandmother suicided. Throughout my early years when she was alive and after she was gone, I sought to understand why she did not want to stay among the living. When I was seeking answers, I never once stopped to consider the impact the ongoing abuse my grandmother experienced at the hands of my grandfather, which most likely occurred from the time they were married, quite possibly before. I never stopped to consider the impact this had on her mental health and her decision to leave this world. Sorry about the wind again. During my grandmother's marriage, she had felt trapped, powerless and under-resourced mentally, physically and emotionally, and unable to leave. I didn't, I left. We're in a different day and age. Obviously, this is a grandmother, but I left. And what that cost me was 4 years of my life, 50 hours a week, wiping prelingual children's bottom holes, feeding them, putting them in and out of cots, in and out of high chairs, on and off change tables, and complying with Julia Gillard's 350 pieces of safety regulation, and report writing as to how children were meeting the educational requirements of Labor's becoming belonging legislation that Gillard put in when she was the early childhood minister, or the minister for early childhood, before she rolled Rudd, as I said the other day. So this article in the Illawarra Mercury by Laura Brooks continues. During my grandmother's marriage, she had felt trapped, powerless and under-resourced mentally, physically and emotionally, and unable to leave. Over the course of 3 decades, she had ongoing admissions to psychiatric wards. She experienced electroshock therapy, attended counselling and was medicated to solve, it says, her mental health issues. Responsibility was placed solely on her to address her mental health issues. So she's being abused and she has a trauma response, and this entire Australian system was blaming the woman. It's kind of like what's going on around the rest of the world right now in every single nation, isn't it? Why didn't you leave? He was beating you up. And, like my mum said, who was not beaten up, but who was nonetheless miserable and disempowered for most of her marriage, said, where would I go? How would I pay for your roof, the roof and our food? What would I do? She hadn't worked in a paid job. She'd worked as a mother, unpaid, of course, like most mothers on earth. You can say fathers too, but that's a limited comparatively usually. So responsibility was placed on her solely to address her so-called mental health issues. For women like my grandmother who experience ongoing abuse, living with a perpetrator is akin to living in a war-torn environment. Research now demonstrates that the legacy of trauma caused directly by family and domestic abuse, it's a euphemism, isn't it? It's usually male abuse. You don't usually find, unless you're Sinead O'Connor, that your mother's beating the crap out of you. But it's kind of quaint because we know that it's overwhelmingly abuse by men of women. But they still make it nice for men by calling it a euphemism, which is domestic violence. Well, statistics are that it's male violence. I'll give you the citation in a moment for that, if you haven't worked it out already from reading. I'm just going to stop here. We had 2 women in the last 24 hours, again, murdered this week in Perth, in the Crown Hotel, and a Filipino woman who is a mother of 4 children, 2 of who are in primary school. And of course, in both cases, police have said, they've now charged one of them in Perth, but in both cases, police have again quaintly said that her partner or ex-partner was helping them with their investigations. Is anyone going to tell me why there's not 2 women a week murdering men, particularly given we're paid less, earn less, have less superannuation, etc., etc.? It's got a message on LinkedIn there. I'm just going to ignore it for a minute. So this article by Laura Brooks in the Illawarra Mercury says that research now demonstrates that the legacy of trauma caused directly by family and domestic abuse is like the trauma impacts soldiers experience when they return from war. As a nation, we understand and accept the impact war has on soldiers, but little recognition is given to the ongoing impact of domestic abuse on women's mental health. And I'm going somewhere with this because one of the specious lies that is put around by the people who, two of them, but particularly one who has viciously and mendaciously deprived my children of me for years on end, despite me downing all tools and my intellect and running a family daycare service for 50 hours a week for 4 years, do the maths on that, with prelingual children alone in order to leave him because childcare was so prohibitively expensive under both Labor and the Liberal Party forever. And in fact, to Albo's great credit, he's the only Prime Minister I have noticed who's recently seriously said the words universal free childcare. Go Albo. You need to kick a few goals now because the right-wing nut jobs are still coming after you. Domestic abuse exacerbates pre-existing mental health issues. Mental health issues that never existed prior to experiences of violence are often directly caused by the perpetrator's choice to use abuse. Women experience ongoing threat and trauma not from a stranger on a battlefield, but at the hands of those they love in their own home. Perpetrator tactics of abuse and violence relentlessly create and entrench patterns of control within the home to entrap women and make it impossible to leave. Well, again, I said bugger that, but it did take me 6 months to find a house. I had little children and no job. And that was 2010. So it's only got drastically worse in that time in Australia. Turn on the news at night, you'd have to have been on Mars to not have noticed that there's a cost of living crisis and there is the lowest rate of rental availability on record, apparently. I think the ABC said last night. And there's also 30 people typically going, and they can be a couple with 2 employed people going for every single house. So how are women, who are now the biggest cohort of growing cohort, of homeless people, women in their 50s who've brought up children, the children have gone and now they've got nothing by way of a good CV to return to for paid work. How are they meant to get a house? 15-year-long wait lists on public housing. And then the Greens came in to try and wreck that again recently with Labor. It's good in the end that they got more of what they wanted, which was a higher number. And of course, when I run this country, which I bloody well might, don't think I'm joking. Why not? You have venal dipshits like Barnaby Joyce. Now, if you try to sue me for defamation, Barnaby Joyce, arguably you are a venal dipshit, so watch out. Don't try and sue me. I'll get you. Yeah, I might run. This is outrageous. So you've got 15-year-long wait lists for public housing. You've got women's biggest cohort of homeless people, growing homeless people, is women in their 50s who have brought up children and can't get back in the paid workforce, and they can't therefore get a house. There's 30 people going for every rental, unless they're rich. Through this approach mental health issues are weaponised against women. This is an article from the Illawarra Mercury for those who just dropped in. Through this approach, and she's writing about, Laura Brooks is writing about her grandmother who killed herself when she was 12. Obviously, the child was 12, not the grandmother. Through this approach, mental health issues are weaponised against women, with the perpetrator then viewed as the protective parent. And remember, of course, this is what my youngest child's father has done to me now by putting an AVO on me when I turned up out after 2 years of not seeing her, including being stuck in COVID-19 version 1 enforced border closures, stuck in Tasmania, after running a childcare centre, and then working as a professional nanny in 2021 for lawyers, partners in law firms, and still not seeing my children for 4 months at a time because there's no penalty whatsoever in Australia at all. Nothing. Nothing. Steal a child? No, help yourself. Stop again. Did that not alarm in a great big red flag every single male and female minister and policy advisor? Does that not alarm absolutely everybody watching this, that you can go to jail for not paying a parking fine and then driving your own car, despite the fact that your skill set hasn't changed at all, but you will not go to jail for stealing a child off a loving parent? Nothing happens. And so I now have 7 people out of my 600 cohort, my cohort of 600 lovely, kind friends who haven't seen their children at all for years. And most of them are men, of course. I say, of course, that's how historically it went. So through this approach, mental health issues, this is a woman suffering a so-called mental health issues, and then they've shoved her in hospital and they've fried her brain with electroconvulsive therapy, ECT. And they have made her the site of the problem, even though she was being bashed by her husband. And this is the woman who killed herself when her granddaughter was 12, and the granddaughter's writing. So through this approach, mental health issues are weaponised against women, and with the perpetrator then viewed as the protective parent. Cunning stunt. Systems continually silence the voices of survivors and work in ways which ensure the actions of perpetrators remain invisible. The very systems that are meant to protect women and children actively work against them. This is not me writing it. Making it even harder to safely leave. And remember, my godmother, Anne Rogers, was 63 when she went to leave my godfather, Warren Rogers, who was 68. And on the 13th of September 2016, he stuck a pillow over her head and violently held her down and killed her. And they had just become grandparents because, of course, the most dangerous time for a woman is when she goes to leave. And remember that my youngest child's father told me that he could kill me and get away with it because everybody would believe it was in self-defence. Don't be a mouthy broad. But I'd left. And he's now weaponised my own children against me. No problem whatsoever with the local police. They don't give a shit. But family law court orders in my hand with a rubber stamp say, hey, how about you uphold the law because you're officers of the law and you're not doing that. And they don't, because they somehow think they're above it. As I've said in previous videos here on this page below, knock yourself out. I certainly have been. In July 2021, the Royal Commission into Defence and Veterans Suicide, hello David McBride, was established. A year later, the Royal Commission into Defence and Veterans Suicide interim report was delivered to the Governor-General. It was then tabled in Parliament and made public with 13 urgent recommendations. Prior to this, in 2017, a report by the New South Wales Domestic Violence Deaths Review Team showed a clear correlation between suicide and domestic violence, with just under 40%, that's nearly half, of all the suicides in the study known to police due to domestic violence. I'd like to know how they measured that. I'll have to have a look. 2017. And this is exactly after it had happened to me by a couple of years, several years, 3 years, and 1 year after my godmother, Anne, had been murdered at Milperra by my godfather. Just on that, The last words out of her mouth, according to the Inside Run, were, "I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. I can live with my sister, I'll live with my father. I'd rather die, I'd rather be dead than live with you." Or I'd rather die or I'd rather be dead than live with you. I cocked that up. So he obliged her. Killed her. And he's so fucked in the head, like the two men in the last 24 hours in Perth and in South Australia who've just murdered 2 more women this week. He's so fucked in the head that he thought because he owned her, of course he was her husband and he's a man, he thought that when you watch, if you go to YouTube right now and type in Warren Rogers, murder, Milperra, 2016, there's only one news report left and it's Channel 9. Whereas the Channel 10 news that's on at 5 o'clock in Sydney, or at least in Central Coast that afternoon, was far more revelatory, in my opinion, because it interviewed the neighbours, and the neighbours had been living beside them peaceably for 40 years. It was a very stable neighbourhood. And one of them, I remember, said, he just stared off, like had that 1,000-yard stare, and he said, "You may as well have told me that little green Martians have landed," when they walked around the neighbourhood and held hands for 40 years. But she went to leave him. And so he told a close relative that she, when they had the argument, because she was silly enough when she was going upstairs to get onto her computer and talk to her lover, which he already had known about for 6 months. She was silly enough to say, "Oh, I'm just going upstairs to take off my makeup." And, I say silly enough even though I wasn't in their marriage, because I would have thought after 45 years that that's not necessarily, like prosaic things like taking off your makeup is not necessarily something that you would announce. So it kind of was probably like announcing to him that she was going upstairs to not take her makeup off and was sneaking around. She had a guilty conscience. Said something stupid. So he comes and follows her up, looks over her shoulder, creeps into the room, looks over his shoulder. Massive fight breaks out. He throws her on the bed and she's kicking him off. And Justice Julia Lonergan in the Supreme Court of New South Wales ruled that whilst this was no ordinary case of domestic violence, nonetheless the post-mortem proved that she fought for her life and gave him a bloody red-hot run for his money before he finally literally snuffed her with a pillow on the conjugal bed. And apparently in their fight, the last words out of her mouth were, "I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. I'd rather live with my sister, I'd rather live with my father, I'd rather be dead than live with you." And so when you go, to get back to the point because I'm tired, sorry, when you go to YouTube and you type in Warren Rogers murder, Milperra, and ANNE, you'll find that the Channel 9 News report has an interview with him, and the police are sitting, the policewoman, the detective, is sitting beside the bed taking notes calmly, saying, "And so how did you do that?" And he says, "I smothered her to death with a pillow." And I'm not sure what words she used. As I said the other day, I'm not sure whether she says why and how did you do that, or what prompted you. I can't remember the exact words. You look it up. I should know it off by heart. Sorry. He says, "Because she asked me to." And I say it like that because he was doped up to the eyeballs. He was highly sedated because apparently he'd had a crack at taking his own life, like the man successfully did last week, the very young man who worked with at St Andrew's Cathedral School with the water polo player Lily, who was murdered at 22 with her whole life ahead of her as a teacher at a very expensive private school, Christian, that my daughter attended for 4 years, called St Andrew's Cathedral School. And she didn't even make it out of the high security patrolled $40,000 a year for each student building. She was murdered on the job in the change rooms, bludgeoned to death, and he went and threw himself off the cliff in the eastern suburbs. And again, we've had, just in the last 24 hours, 2 women murdered in Australia. A Filipino mother, as I said before, of 4 children, 2 of them are primary school age. She was 46. And we've had Counting Dead Women. We've had another woman murdered in Perth. And in that case, he went and did the same thing as the guy last week, only he wasn't successful, like my godfather Warren Rogers was not successful. You got to argue maybe they didn't try too hard, because the suicide statistics all around the world, I believe, and definitely in Australia, are that men are 4 times more successful at each suicide attempt than women. I believe that they try it at roughly similar rates. I could be wrong. But from what I recall, suicide statistics are that men are 4 times more successful in actually killing themselves. But not these 2 guys, not my godfather and not the man at Perth who they're questioned and now charged. And I think they've questioned and about to charge the murderer of the Filipino mother of 4 as well in South Australia. That's in the last 24 hours in a democracy. Come on, boys. Where are all the women killing the men? Really? I've got more than enough motivation, don't you? Paid less on every metric. So she concludes, my grandmother was not the sum of the things that were done to her, and she was more than her diagnosed mental health issue. She was the kindest, most loving, fiercely protective woman I knew. This is her granddaughter, Laura Brooks. She was well ahead of her time. From her, I gained my fierce passion for human rights and social justice advocacy work. For her, I speak out. And Laura Brooks is apparently a survivor advocate and the mental health team leader at Illawarra Women's Health Centre. So the lie, because I had a nervous breakdown after all the things described in the videos below, and so the lie, this idiot, I keep calling people idiots because you think that people would know, Jesus Christ, that is quite a dossier of suffering and trauma and shock you've just had, all back to back there, and long-term litigation from your oldest child's father, setting the tone for all of it, and your mother's death, and then nearly dying yourself, and then having to sell your home to pay to save your life because the public hospital wait list was 5 weeks long and you were going to die in it, so you needed 18 grand that you didn't have on hand, so you had to sell your house in the rainforest, and then you lost your 5-year-old daughter while you're standing self-defending in the middle of it. Oh, and your godfather murdered your wife. And you was most normal people who aren't psychotic, like the father of my psychopath, like the father of my youngest child. And I've got mine, obviously, to last night's Australian story with the guy who genuinely was a psychopath when he was growing his own pot, living south of the Mullumbimby rainforest for years as a vagrant and a mentally ill one, and then finally came out of the wilderness, literally, and went to TAFE, and then went to uni, and then got a doctorate, and then got and then got a child, and inherited 2 lovely children from his wife, older children from his wife as well, and that's a beautiful happy ending. And he, of course, was mercilessly beaten to a pulp by his father as well. And his mother then told him one day, lied and said, we're going to go and stay at your auntie's. And when they got there, it was a bloody great big brick edifice. And, of course, it wasn't the aunties at all. It was an orphanage, and she gave them away without notice and left. And she had been beaten routinely. And he had been beaten trying to stand up for her. And, of course, so this is his history of trauma, and it sent him over the edge. And he became, of course, a violent man. And you've got to worry if your own children have been exposed to this. And this is one of the killer aspects of things for me, is that I've got my children being trapped, literally, by this seriously deranged person, because a loving parent would put the children at the centre and say, well, look, wow, there's a mum who's got a good uni degree and brought up 2 out of 3 children at the top of the state. Hopefully my youngest will be when I get her back as well. And I say that because I think it matters to strive for education. That's a value of mine, and I get to say that. I'm an elder, and I don't give a shit what anyone thinks about that. That's a value of mine, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And music, and she's worked as a professional nanny and run her own business as a childcare service provider for immaculately 50 hours a week by herself for 4 years, just to leave this guy who's keeping and using my children to weaponise them against me and claiming that I have a mental health problem. So I'm now going to read the reports of just so that all of those people who walk around me that I've had to walk around for the last 35 years, since I was 17 in Sydney, who, be it at music gigs and venues, etc., just out and about in the hoi polloi. No, that's that nut job who lost her kids and she's bipolar and she's sick and she's schizophrenic. No, I'm not. Nothing, unfortunately, could be further from the truth. I say unfortunately because maybe I'd be able to hallucinate and imagine that this wasn't actually happening if I was that deranged and structurally unwell. Bugger, hang on, it's not working twice. Why? Great. God, what's it? Chrome and Safari, what is the difference? Here we go. I'm just going to log in with Chrome because it's a Google Drive that I'm using in case everything burns down in a house fire or dies. The laptop's very old and full, and in case I lose it, I've backed it all up to the cloud, the Google Cloud, the Drive. Just give me 1 second. Sorry about this. I'm going to waste your time. Oh my God, brilliant. Not sure if you're still there. Ouch, pains in my chest as usual. I'm not well. I don't sleep at all, and that will kill you. Ooh, pains. So I'm going to read to you now a letter written by someone you can Google. His name is Dr. David Sturrock. And he's a psychiatrist and he's in Sydney. And this is dated the 21st of June, 2023. So that's 12 weeks ago now? What is it? June, July, August, September? Yep, 4 months ago. To the Family Court of Australia. Re Danielle Farah Pryke, 23/12/70. This 52-year-old woman is chronically traumatised by being deprived of a meaningful relationship with her children. She has been limited to occasional phone calls with the youngest two children. My youngest two children's names are inserted for the past 6 years. She has not seen her daughter properly for the past 6 years in any meaningful way. She has chronic symptoms of depressed mood, high anxiety, severe insomnia, frequent panic attacks, graphic nightmares, severe levels of subjective distress, and intense longings to see her children. She has had a chronic tachycardia. That's a speeding up of your heart that just comes out of nowhere and attacks you, and you just feel like you're being chased by a tiger. It's otherwise known as a panic attack, but your heart actually measurably accelerates, and I've got the heart blood pressure measuring gear in the cupboard over there because now I'm off the Richter scale all the time and I'm on beta blockers which stop the action of adrenaline on your heart. They slow it down. She has had a chronic tachycardia and high blood pressure. I always had low blood pressure because I always used to be skinny and I'd stand up and spin out. Now I have high blood pressure and necessitating medication. She previously had low blood pressure and a normal heart rate. Her diagnoses include major depression, generalized anxiety disorder, and panic disorder. The differential diagnoses include adjustment disorder. Well, I can't adjust to this. I can't adjust to every single day and night and moment going by without my children. So the differential diagnoses include adjustment disorder with traumatic stress symptoms. In other words, she suffers from traumatic stress or complex PTSD. And the difference between PTSD and complex PTSD, in case you don't already know, is that you can go and see someone watch a horror show, bomb go off, and then just have it replay in your mind and get stuck in a loop, and that's PTSD. Complex PTSD, that's usually a one-off event, or you go to a war for 12 weeks and it's kind of considered a one-off event. Complex PTSD is ongoing. You're distressed the entire time because the thing that is distressing you is still happening. She has seen multiple psychologists and had multiple medications with limited effect. Well, remember, I got misdiagnosed as psychotic, shoved in an acute ward for 4 weeks, and then stuck on the most hideous drugs on earth, lithium, olanzapine, mirtazapine, and there was a cocktail. And I went from 57 kilos to 78 kilos, more than a third of my body weight, and never really have recovered because, of course, menopause hit at the same time after the hysterectomy. They left my ovaries in though because your ovaries regulate your brain mood, and they didn't want me to totally plunge off a cliff. Her symptoms, last line, would be significantly ameliorated if she were to have normal contact and time with her children. So again, this is part of my pitch to you to try to support my case, whether you be a media producer, a news producer, a documentary producer, or somebody who can do this case justice in any way, give it money. The latest quote was $500 again for 1 hour with the family law court expert down the road again this morning. So I could do it myself again in this state. It's hard. And I don't know all the tech specs, and it's better to do it without. So that's the last 2 years. By the way, he also wrote to my ex and invited him to come in and help manage me by telling him his side of the story. Never got a reply. Surprise, surprise. So here we have the second psychiatrist, and his name is Dr. Jason Pace. And his letter reads, when I get it up, sorry. It's on this, you can't, there's lots of different ones, and I don't know, it's on the drive. Here we go. Sorry. Trying to line up the... this is the 19th of August 2021, so at this point I'm working full-time as a nanny. To whom it may concern, me. Letter is to acknowledge that I am Ms. Farah Price's current treating psychiatrist. I first met Danielle 17th September 2020. Remember, this is just after I've escaped lockdown version 1 and from March to June interstate by myself and not even FaceTime with my children. Part of the plan to kill me, literally. Fuck off back to Tasmania and die. This letter is provided as a progress letter to inform the court of Ms. Farah Pike's progress with treatment. I've now consulted with Ms. Farah Pike on 14 separate occasions between this date and that date. Due to the COVID situation, these sessions have been a mixture of face-to-face visits, telehealth consultation and phone consultation. The sessions have been roughly 4 to 6 weeks apart, or sometimes they were 2. Her compliance has been excellent over this time. We initially commenced some medication, but this has now been ceased and we have largely focused on psychotherapy. Well, that's because nothing works. Like, no antidepressant works if you've got nothing and nobody and your children are all gone and your family's suing each other and you don't have a career left over because you gave it all to your children. And based on my assessment, I've diagnosed Ms. Farah Pike with major depressive disorder. Now, remember, this is also what Warren Rogers was diagnosed with when his wife wanted to leave him, but he killed her. We don't see that many women who've got major depressive disorder going and killing men. I won't give you my personal opinions on that, but I have said before, why waste a perfectly good terminal diagnosis? I don't understand why more women aren't going and avenging what's been done to them. But anyway, it's against the law. Doesn't stop the men though, does it? This is characterised by a pervasive depressed mood, fatigue, feelings of worthlessness and guilt. In addition to her depressive symptoms, she also experiences anxious distress related to her situation. The main source of distress relates to the matter in front of the courts, that is, custody and access to her children. In addition, other stresses include her financial situation, and this has been made more difficult with the current COVID climate. Despite the above, Ms. Farah Pike, steadily improving her mood over the period I've been treating her. She shows resilience and determination today that was not apparent when I met her a year ago, and I think this reflects her underlying resilience pre-morbid. I think I was dead, but yeah, effectively am. It is my understanding that Ms. Farah Pike was assessed by a family psychiatrist, and this is this fuckwit, Dr. Lucia Vardenega. Fuck you. In 2016, I don't like an angry woman, do they? Can't put that on TV. Oh, bugger you. I hope that she sees it. Assessed as by a family psychiatrist in 2016, at that time, as she was assessed as not being suitable to have custody of her children. Well, again, that was bullshit. That was the trauma caused all by men. Like men trying to take my children off me consistently and successively in the oldest and my youngest daughter's case. My mum dying, that's not men. That's life. And then her godfather, her stepbrother, murdering his wife, and the assaults that I'd already sustained by the fathers of my youngest 2 children, which are on the police record, as they did to every woman before me. So it's not unique to me. It's not something I caused. We all like to say the women, what did you do to make him murder you? That's what someone said to me when my godmother first was murdered. She said, why? So, I don't know, it really we're going to have that conversation. There's a why, is there? Why? Because she was bonking another man and he didn't like it. Well, in our democracy, that's not a good enough reason, thank God, but it is in most other places on earth, still, or a lot of them. Certainly the Middle East and certainly Afghanistan and certainly vast swathes of South America. And, I don't know what's happening in China, but there's not too many women in the Chinese People's Party upholding half of the sky, as they say women do, but they don't seem to be upholding half of the government. Grand designs, eh? And then he says, Dr. Jason Pace, psychiatrist, says, while I have not, in 2021, have not received a copy of this report, Ms. Farrow-Pryke informs me that based on the cross-sectional assessment of at the time, she was diagnosed with complex PTSD or borderline personality disorder. Now, in other readings, I will tell you what that is, because it's an outdated, antiquated term, as Associate Professor Carolyn Quadrio said under cross-examination by me, self-represented in 2017. She said it was an outdated, antiquated a bit of verbal kit nomenclature that meant that you were supposed to be on the border of a psychosis and a depression or a something else. But of course, I was neither. I was traumatized. And so the doctor goes on and says, the psychiatrist, Dr. Jason Pace, goes on in 2021 about me and says, I think it is unfortunate that such diagnoses are made after brief cross-sectional assessments. Mine took 2 hours. And at times of great distress, as this often leads to a diagnosis that is not accurate, but unduly attributes a negative stigma to the person. So one of the things I'm doing here, apart from trying to ventilate what's going on for seven other loving parents I know, and is therefore going on for 1% of people I know, is going on for a whole lot more than that, obviously, because there's no punishment for stealing children off parents in Australia, is to ventilate this disgusting human rights abuse. And then he finishes the last 3 paragraphs. With the hindsight of almost 12 months of developing a therapeutic relationship with me, I do not believe she has persistent symptoms. I do not believe she has persistent symptoms of a cluster B personality disorder. So one of the things that my youngest child's father and my oldest child's father like to do is to go around and say, oh, well, she's got narcissistic personality disorder and she's been diagnosed as bipolar and psychotic and everything. Wrong. By way of 3 psychiatrists subsequently and a psychologist. So wrong, just traumatised. And he says, and I believe any presentation that might have suggested that I did have those mental dysfunctions was transient and better explained by her being in a state of acute crisis. I'm happy to continue to provide treatment for her indefinitely at this stage, and I've agreed to treat her at Medicare rates. And then we have another one from Ranasinghe, an Indian man who treated me in both a public hospital twice for depression after I lost my daughter and then my son, because I had a nervous breakdown from losing my daughter. And so there's that Joseph Heller book called Catch-22, very famous, and it's now insinuated itself in English language a very long while ago, at least all of my life. And it just means you're stuck in a situation where the answer is necessarily related to the unresolvable problem at the beginning and you're going around and around in a circle. It's a catch-22. So again, someone said to me this week, if they don't want to see you anymore, your children, because they've been alienated and estranged, well, what can you do? Well, everyone here can just pop on over to Instagram and type my name in, because there's 1,600 videos and photos of evidence, hardcore evidence, that just shows happy, loved, loving, laughing, dancing, musical, piano playing, tennis playing, skiing, ice skating, surfing, swimming, taught, adored, held, hugged, photographed by me in every moment of their life, night and day, children. And I own the IP, so I can use every single shot. And they said, well, how can you get my friend was trying to be helpful, and she said, you've got to mend your relationship with them. I said, I keep telling you, the entire reason he's kept them from me deliberately is so that it's ruined. So how do you mend not only BG stuff? It's not just how do you mend a broken heart. It's not just how do you mend a broken heart. It's how do you mend a relationship with someone when they're not even provided to you by the other person deliberately in order to try and kill you. Here and here. So I think that's enough for today, because I always end up this way, which is just grief-strickenly depressed. And it's appropriate, because you have a sense that every single moment of the night and day, what are they doing now? It could be with them. We would be doing this. We would be eating. We would be reading a book. We would be going to dance lessons. We would be swimming at the beach. We would be. If only we could be, and we did, and we were, and now it's suddenly like the Berlin Wall went up, and overnight entire families were cleaved in half and never saw each other again. And remember, I told you in the last 2 days that that's what he threatened in his email, that my friend wrote to him about getting some time for Christmas and for the tickets that I've bought to the Sydney Opera House to see Professor Brian Cox and the Sydney Symphony Orchestra have the universe explained to us with amazing projections behind him, presumably taken by the Hubble telescope or whatever the latest one is. I've forgotten. I don't think you have to be a parent to imagine the pain. You could give it a try, but certainly being a parent helps. But being a mother, I know fathers love their children sometimes a lot more than some mothers, but being a mother who's totally devoted to her golden children, and they're now gone. It's impossible to explain how it feels. It's children. It's children. Anyway, push it around if you can. Again, I know something. I chose to address this today because the silence is deafening from people I know who've got lovely lifestyles, lovely lives. They're always going out for drinks, and they're always going out on some lovely outing or whatever. And not everyone I know is wealthy, but a lot of people I know are very comfortable. And there's not many people throwing into the lawyer hat here. Hat for the law, for the legal, for the lawyer, for the retention of the lawyer, which just means that they're going to make me do it over again for what will be well, it was at least 3 or 4 times for my eldest child, and it was 2 or 3 times for my youngest, so that'd be 7. And then other cases where he put an AVO on me that was incorrect. And I told you the cops turned up because my children's name had been left on them, and I went to give her a home-cooked meal and some clothes that I'd bought for her and her brother, and 5 police with 3 squad cars and a feces-smeared paddy wagon arrested me the next day. And then last week they threw that out because they were wrong, because I got an email from the Downing Centre saying, oops, we fucked up, you're wrong, but have chosen not to withdraw the charge of resisting arrest, which I was going, stop it, I haven't done anything. And that, bruises all over me. So now, I'm the one with the record. Flipped it. Anyway, thank you. If you can push it to anyone who can do anything about covering it in news or in documentary form, or as an idea for a fictionalised account, g'day Chris, or particularly for fundraising, please do. Bye.